All right, good evening, well, late evening, everyone. If I can just have your attention for a few minutes, I'd like to thank you all for coming out. I'm Erica Watkins Smith with the Montgomery County Board of Education, and I represent District 7, and Danley is one of the schools in my district. I'm so excited about the presentation that you'll hear this evening. You're going to learn a lot of exciting news about what we plan to do with the ad valorem that you all have voted on to make our schools better for our students. So just sit back and relax and take it all in, and if you have comments, we ask that you just respectfully allow our guests from Volker to please answer and get your questions answered for you. I know that there will be email contacts as well for you to email them if you have additional questions and your questions were not addressed tonight. But just sit back and relax, and I'm going to hand it over to, is it you? To all right, Dr. Moore, or right this way. Somebody's going to come up.
I think, yeah, Dr. Moore, if you and Mr. Watts and Chad make some comments, would be great.
So I'm not going to take much time except to say thank you so much. It's great to see so many of you out tonight so that you can hear firsthand the information that's going to be presented. And you won't get secondhand information. That's always good, because I remember that old game we used to play when we were little kids, and we'd whisper and they would go down the line. And by the time it got to the end of the line, it was a whole different message from what it was when you first started. So this is great. I'm excited about it because I think it's going to be a new day for MPS over the next 3 to 4 years. We're going to see some real changes occurring with our facilities, and hopefully also with our student achievement as we work on those things as well. So thank you again for coming, and we're looking forward to hearing from you tonight, as well as in the future. If you have comments or questions that you would like to have answered, please feel free to get those to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I also would like to thank you all for coming out. We believe that coming to you and getting the public input is extremely important. A year or two ago, we embarked on the situation of looking into the finances of Montgomery Public Schools. We wanted to see exactly where we are, what we needed to do to make ourselves somewhat competitive to other school districts in the state of Alabama and, of course, in the nation. But as we began to look at the finances, we recognized a few things. One of the things we recognized was that the amount of revenues we had coming into Montgomery was not even close to the amount of revenues that other urban school districts in the state of Alabama were receiving. And that was a huge problem, and I'll talk about that in just a second. We also recognized some things that was not so positive. We dug down deep and kind of saw a few things that were somewhat unethical, and we said we're gonna face this head on, that these are taxpayers' dollars, these are public monies, and we want to ensure that every dollar that came into Montgomery Public Schools will be expended for its intended purposes. And so that caused us to really look down, and we saw some unethical things, and we said we're going to deal with it. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We know it may present a bad face for the district at first, but we thought that it would be the beginning. Putting on the right face and being really, really honest with everyone. Therefore, we brought some of those things to the forefront. Some people were dealt with as it relates to the judicial system. Some are still being dealt with, and we're turning the page now. In fact, I think the audit will be presented at our next board meeting, the audit for fiscal year 2020, and you will see some drastic changes. So the board is in really, really good hands now as it relates to ensuring that financial policies, procedures, and every dollar that comes into Montgomery is being taken care of. Those monies are being expended for its intended purpose, and that's what we wanted. But as we continue to compare our funds to the Birminghams and Huntsville's, there was a huge problem. We recognized that as it relates to the local dollars that we were receiving, Montgomery were receiving, compared to Birmingham, there was a vast difference. In fact, Montgomery was receiving about $55 million a year in local revenues, while Birmingham was receiving over $102 million in local revenues. Well, you may say that, well, that's because Birmingham is larger than Montgomery. That's not the case as it relates to the student body, student population, employees, and so forth. You may not know that Birmingham has about 24,000 students compared to Montgomery's 27 to 28,000 students. However, Montgomery receives $55 million. Birmingham was receiving over $104 million. Then we thought we'll look at Huntsville City Schools, which is another urban school district, much of the same demographics as Montgomery. And we recognized that Huntsville was receiving about $102 million a year in local revenues compared to Montgomery's, again, $55 million. Then we looked at the student body of Huntsville compared that to Montgomery. Again, Montgomery, 27 to 28,000 students. Huntsville City Schools, 22,000 students. So we were asked to do so much more with so less. And then we decided to, Dr. Moore and many of the staff decided to kind of ride around, look at some of the buildings and just kind of get a feel for the district. And when we saw some of these buildings, we knew exactly why they were in the shape that they were in. Actually, it was very eyesore. It's kind of sick, to be quite honest with you, that our facilities were in the shape that they were in. Then we found out that there was a study that was done a number of years ago in which there was a need for over $250 million worth of deferred maintenance. And you and I, we all know that if we have a problem at our own homes, we don't deal with that problem and go years and years, it's going to get a lot worse. And that's what we found here in Montgomery, that there were problems that were identified. The problems were not dealt with because the funding was not there, and the problems became a lot worse. So now, whereas there may be $250 million worth of deferred maintenance, we don't know how much it is now. And that's why Volcker is here. They're doing a facilities assessment. They're doing a demographic study to see what our true needs are and to answer many of the questions that you have. When I look at our mission statement, the district's mission statement, our purpose and direction, you know, our purpose states we will engage, educate, and inspire our students to succeed in college, career, and beyond. Now I'm going to read this same statement again. I'm going to add a few words to it. We will engage, educate, and inspire our students to succeed in college, career, and beyond in safe, secure, clean, and comfortable facilities. Our vision statement states, MPS is a place where every student develops a love of learning, cultivates intellectual curiosity, and dreams of a future full of amazing possibilities. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to add a few more words to that. MPS is a place where every student develops a love of learning, cultivates intellectual curiosity, and dreams of a future full of amazing possibilities in safe, secure, clean, and comfortable facilities. And that's what this meeting here is all about. That's what this input, we're seeking your input, is all about. We want to ensure that with the amount of money that we're about to embark upon, that we'll be able to provide our students, all of our students, with really, really, really good facilities. And that's what this is all about. Again, Volcker is doing a demographic study. They're doing facility assessments. They're talking to city planning departments. They're talking to the housing, because we want to make sure that when we do decide to build or renovate schools, we're doing it based on data, on good data. So we need to look at what are the projections over the next 5 to 10 years as it relates to population growth. What areas are the growth projected? Where would residential homes be? Where would businesses be located? So all of those things have to be looked at when you're talking about building schools that are going to last for the next 10, 15, and 20 years. And so that's what they are doing now. They're also looking at every single facility, every doorknob, every window, to determine what are the needs in each of these facilities. And then, of course, decisions will be made there. Now, in collecting all of this data, there's another thing that we're going to have to confront. And I want to be honest with you guys. And a lot of times, this word is a bad word. The word consolidation. It's a bad word. I served as CFO in Birmingham for about 14 years, and we consolidated, I think, 14 or 16 schools in 1 year. In 1 year. That was a hard reality. Now, I do not foresee us having to do that much in Montgomery, so I'll go ahead and say that. I don't think we'll have to do that much in Montgomery. But there will be a need for us to really look at whether there's a need to consolidate some schools. Again, we're receiving these monies only one time, and we have to ensure that those dollars are spent, in a very meaningful way, in ensuring that we're getting the best bang for the dollars. I'm going to ask Mr. Chad Anderson, our facilities director, to come up to kind of give you a little overview of the positions and the shape of our facilities. He can kind of give you a little bit more insight on that. But again, we're going to have to make some very, very tough decisions in the next several weeks. Mr. Anderson.
I won't steal Volkert's thunder. Their presentation will do that on the facilities. What I do want you to understand is what we've been doing with Mr. Slater and his crew. My departments have been working with Mr. Slater and his group to help standardize things. And what that'll help us do is help us maintain when Volkert leaves, when the work is done, it'll help us maintain things better. So, for example, you may have this type of HVAC controls right now at one location and a different type at another. So what we want to do is make it all the same so that it's standardized and we can work on it. We can train our people to work on those things and do a better job of keeping those up. And that goes throughout everything, is when you're talking about flooring or lighting or the type of roof systems or what you're painting, the different things that you have there. So they're looking at all of those things. Again, it's a comprehensive thing. Not only are we talking about, I know Mr. Watts talked a lot about classrooms, and that's curricular. We're talking about extracurricular as well. We know there's needs, for example, in the elementary schools. There's no gymnasiums in most of those. There's not a lot of adequate facilities to do those type of things. Fine arts, we know that there are places that don't have great band rooms and different things, different programs to fit that. One of the things that will go into that is once the capital plan is looked at and approved, where you're talking about different locations, then they'll go in with architects and engineers and do the programming. And going through some of those, what that means is they sit down with each school, they talk to those people in the school, get their input, and then they'll put a plan together for what goes there. Sometimes that input is not reality. So one of the schools we're working on and we're building now with BTW, we know it burned down or part of it burned down, and they're right now in an elementary school. Their radio broadcasting, gave some specs and gave some things they wanted, and when our architects and engineers looked at it, it was as large as WSFA's media room. So we knew that wasn't really feasible, and we wanted to give them something that they could work with and do. So they'll help us make those decisions and try to make everything possible for the programmatic needs of each school. And again, Mr. Mitchell and his curriculum side will help weigh into that along with the school. So it's a team effort. It's everybody working together, and just so grateful that the people of Montgomery cared enough about their kids to go out there and help this pass and get us this money, which we know doesn't come in until 2023. Mr. Watts mentioned it the other night. The plan is, we'll hopefully pass something in December, get started with the design phase things in January, and get going with a bond measure, because they know that money's coming in prior to that 2023. But it will take some time to develop that. For example, just across the road, we did an HVAC renovation. That took about 9 months to complete, and we were in COVID with no kids in the building, so it helped us really get ahead, and we finished that ahead of schedule. So these problems didn't happen overnight. It's not going to be fixed overnight. You got to be patient with the process on those things, but know that this team right here and this team up here, we want the best for our kids and our faculty and staffs in these schools. So we just really appreciate you coming out tonight, and look forward to the presentation here.
Yeah, that deserves a clap, ladies and gentlemen. So good evening, everybody. For those of you who have not met, I'm Leon Barkin with Volkert, and I run Volkert's program and construction management practice nationwide. Glenn Slater, sitting at the table there, is the program manager for this program. He's the gentleman who's going to be responsible for delivering all these various projects that Mr. Watts and others have talked about. And I wanted to introduce some of our other team members. We've got a large team for this program. We've got Mike Kemp with Kemp Management Services and his crew there. We've got William Rumpf here somewhere with KWZ. There he is, William. And then Tania Johns, who's going to be helping with the community outreach piece of it. So I wanted to correct one comment earlier. This is not a question and answer session. We're asking the questions. You guys give us the answers. The purpose for this meeting is to get your input. We don't have any preconceived notions of what these projects ought to be, where they ought to go, how big they need to be. There are certain standards, obviously, in the educational business and good best practices for how schools are designed and how big they ought to be, classroom sizes and all that. But we're here tonight because we want your input. And so we want you to come up and talk tonight. If you're not comfortable doing that, Tania, we've got some comment cards. Where are they located? Here at the table? Okay, and then we'd like you to also write this down if you've got something to write on. MPS K-12 CIP at volkert.com is a email address set up specifically to receive input from all of you. So how many parents do we have here tonight? That's fantastic to see. And teachers, great. We only had a few the other night, so I'm really, really happy to see we've got a lot better turnout this evening. Wanted to, before I start the presentation, to piggyback on what Mr. Watts said. We do management of billions of dollars of K-12 work all throughout the Southeast. And I can't tell you how difficult it is for a public school system to be able to pass not only a tax referendum, but specifically an ad valorem tax referendum. That's incredible. That's like a unicorn in this day and age. And so what that tells us anyways is that there's tremendous amount of desire by this community, the business leaders, the parents, teachers, those of you who live and make your do your business here, and know that the health of the school system is a critical aspect of the health of the overall community. And so you all recognize that. You passed a massive tax referendum, and that you all should all be applauded. I mean, it's really an impressive feat in this day and age. On the flip side of that, everybody's eyes is on this program. It's going to be really big, and it's got to be done right. And so we're honored to assist the school system with delivery of that, and that's why we're here tonight. We want to make sure we get it right, and doing it right is not just doing it by some design book or construction book. It's doing it to where the community is bought into the process, the parents are bought in, and at the end of the day, the product that everybody gets fits everybody's need the best that it can. That's the bottom line. So what we're going to present to you all tonight is some of our initial findings. We've been since August, we've had a crew of assessors basically crawling around every square inch of all of your, 52 facilities, getting a basic understanding of the physical condition of the facilities, not just the deficiencies like the lack of insulated windows in this cafeteria, missing ceiling tile or ceiling leaks. Obviously, you can see where the stain ceiling tiles are, but also in talking to the staff, not only at the local schools, but at central office to understand how the facilities work from an operational standpoint and how they meet the needs of the curriculum. A lot of these schools were built back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Education was delivered a lot different back then than it is now. And so what this school system has told us is they want 21st century classrooms. And so many of your buildings just aren't architecturally conducive to that. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. In addition to the overall physical condition, we're also looking at the capacity condition of your facilities. As you'll see here in a minute, when these facilities were built, the Montgomery Public School System enrollment was significantly larger than it is now. So it may seem like a good thing to have plenty of room to spread out in a lot of these buildings, which we certainly do. But what it does is it robs the school system of the ability to fund teaching units, curriculum, the things that really are important, and the reason why the buildings are here in the first place, because they're spending money on air conditioning expense, maintenance expense. Chad, what are y'all spending? $600,000-$700,000 a month on air conditioning, on electric bills every month. And so all that takes away from delivering education. So what our goal is certainly not to have crowded facilities, but as Mr. Watts pointed out in his addition to the mission of the school system, we want really efficient, really comfortable, really safe schools that are efficient to operate, efficient for the staff to be able to manage the student body and the security of those systems, and efficient to be able to deliver education. That's the bottom line. And if we do that, then I think we've succeeded in our goal. What we're not interested in is Cedric, I'm sorry, we're not interested in having design awards at some magazine for these schools. What we're interested in is really solid, beautiful facilities that you all can be proud of, but are putting the money into the curriculum and the educational part of the school where it's going to be delivered, not in a bunch of architectural features that add nothing to the facility. So that's our basic philosophy on these, and that's how we like to deliver our programs, and so that's what we're going to try to do for you all in this particular program. So with that, I'm gonna run through this fairly quickly. Again, the reason we're presenting this to you all tonight is just to really kind of create some dialogue and spur some thought process for you to be able to have something to comment on. We don't want to just come in cold and say, "What do you think?" We want you to have something to bounce ideas off of and see what we're seeing. You may not agree with all of it, and that's okay. Again, I want to make sure all of you know we're not coming in here with any preconceived notions of where schools ought to be, how big schools ought to be, what type of curriculum ought to be taught in those schools. None of that. We're just, telling you like we see it. We're here to get your input. From that input, we're going to put it all into our process, filter it out, come up with a recommendation of renovations, additions, new construction, and then present that to the board for consideration. We hope to do that by the end of the year. And as Mr. Watts, or I think Chad, stated, our goal is to try to get in design on these projects by early part of next year. And we're going to try to get under design on all the facilities at the same time. And that is to one, make sure we can make the biggest impact throughout the system, across the entire system, as quickly as we can, and to get these funds expended and allow as many students as possible to benefit from the tremendous amount of improvement that'll be taking place on the physical condition of your facilities. So the basic things we looked at from a physical standpoint are all the building systems, your HVAC, your electrical systems. We looked at it's called the fenestration, which is your windows, your doors, your roofing, the interior finishes. We looked at technology. We looked at furniture. We looked at the grounds. We looked at the traffic patterns at your various sites to make sure that your car traffic and your bus traffic was separated. We looked at your playgrounds, all the various things that make up a school. Those are all the things we looked at. We helped the State Department of Education, I think back in the mid-90s, develop their facility assessment program. And we follow that program basically with our assessment process. We've got a set of forms real similar to what the State Department does. I know Chad's got to turn in on an annual basis on their facilities. So we follow that process to make sure that we're very complete in our review of the physical condition of the facilities. And then Arthur mentioned the demographic study. The accuracy of the enrollment projection is critically important to making sure that we're making the right decisions with respect to how big the schools need to be, where they need to go, where additions need to take place. We've had situations in the past here where schools may have been built far larger than they needed to be. That's a fact. Or they may have been built where we didn't necessarily need them. And so we've got facilities in the system now that are at much larger capacity than the student enrollment that they actually serve. And that makes for an inefficient situation. We want to avoid that. We want to put the improvements where they need to be in the most efficient possible way we can. Again, not crowding, but comfortable, efficient, and allow the funds to go into the curriculum and teaching. So we've got, it's complete now, an enrollment projection through the year 2030 for every grade in every school in the school system. And that'll be part of the overall study that we've done through the next 10 years. So let's talk about what our findings have been enrollment-wise. So those of you who've lived in Montgomery for a while, it should come as no surprise. We've had an enrollment decline over the last several years. There's currently room, instructional seat, and the capacity, we can have a discussion about how capacity is calculated, but based on student-teacher ratios that are commonly acceptable for high school, middle school, and elementary school, we've got a student capacity in our facilities currently of almost 38,000. So operating like a normal school system, we could fit almost 38,000 students into our current facilities. Now, clearly that doesn't take into account some of our magnet programs and specialty facilities where we intentionally are keeping student-teacher ratios lower. But that's the case. But operating as a normal school system, all things being equal, we can fit about 38,000 students into our current facilities. Our population this year is only 26,000. The projected enrollment in 2025 is almost 26,000, and our projected enrollment in 2030 is shy of 25,000. So it's continuing to steadily decline. We hope that it'll stabilize, but it is still declining. That is a reality. Our demographer, this is not Volker doing this, is extremely accurate. We live and die by enrollment. We want to make sure that those numbers are ones we can count on. That is the most critical aspect of our recommendation with respect to facilities. So we have a lot of faith in the study, and it's a really important aspect of the overall plan. So the average enrollment at the high schools is only about 63% of capacity. Average enrollment of the middle schools is about 71% of capacity. And our average enrollment in elementary schools is only 61% of capacity. And 9 of the 33 elementary schools are below 50% capacity. We've got some schools, we'll see, some have less than 100 students in them. And again, low student-teacher ratios, smaller schools, especially in elementary schools, may seem like a great thing. The problem is that you can't get a critical mass based on the way that funding is done for teachers to be able to offer the type of enriched curriculum that you really want to offer when you don't have a certain minimum number of students at the schools. You may not be able to get an assistant principal that you want based on the funding rules that the school system has to live by. So the enrollment at schools, we don't want massive schools obviously, but we want there to be a critical mass of enrollment to allow for an enriched curriculum and to be able to provide our students with the type of number of teachers, quality teachers, and the curriculum that comes with proper enrollment. This is just a bar chart that summarizes what I just talked about. High school enrollment versus capacity. This is by school. The yellow line is 2030, the blue line is capacity. And again, a lot of these schools, especially the high schools, except for Park Crossing, were built back when the school system had a lot more students in it. And so we've got schools that were built back in the 20s, 30s, 40s where we had a significant larger enrollment to accommodate that. Magnet schools, there was some commentary, I think, at the last meeting. Again, we know that those student-teacher ratios are kept smaller. You can control the enrollment at those various facilities. What this represents is if we took the student-teacher ratios of a normal facility based on that facility size and classroom count, that's the capacity that facility could house. doesn't mean that it is housing that. So don't be alarmed by this particular number. The middle schools have actually, for whatever reason, have maintained their enrollment generally. Kind of gone up a little bit, gone down a little bit, but they've generally maintained enrollment fairly steadily. And the elementary schools is really where we have sort of the largest disparity between enrollment and capacity. So again, Arthur mentioned the reality of having to make some adjustment with respect to some of these facilities and possible consolidations. There's no decisions have been made whatsoever. I was with Arthur when we did 16 of those consolidations. I had a permanent security detail walking around with me during those times. It was a tough time, but at the end of the day, what we were able to do is, when we consolidated, we were able to take students out of a really crummy, poor condition, leaky roofs, leaky windows, depressing environment into brand new or fully renovated facilities. And so we've got hopefully enough funding to be able to do the exact same thing here. If there's a consolidation that's needed, if we can get past my grandfather or my great-grandfather went to this school to this is what's best for my kids, and going into a brand new, beautiful facility, at the end of the day, I doubt anybody out there is complaining about the consolidation now in Birmingham. They're in great, brand new facilities. So just to go through some of the physical findings, those of you who have kids in schools, none of this is going to come as a surprise to you. We'll start off with the high schools really quick. Lanier, by far, is one of the, not to offend anybody, one of the worst conditioned schools that I personally have walked through in any of the high schools I've been to. It's in really, really rough shape. It's some 90 years old, and it's only at about 40% capacity. Lee High School, it's over 60 years old. It's only about 60% capacity. It's in rough shape. One of the real, beyond the condition, one of the things that you sometimes can't get around with a complete renovation, and we've renovated everything you can think of and make it look like a shiny new dime. Some of the things you can't get around are the architectural impasses or deficiencies of that building. Lee is a prime example of that, where you have unfeathered access to the school from the street, and where you have classroom doors going out to the exterior and not into a controlled corridor. We don't build schools like that anymore. That's just not, we would never do that. That is a security and management nightmare. And so that, we can change all the windows, put all new air conditioning in, new flooring. I mean, the inside of the classroom could look brand new. That is something that's very difficult to deal with in a cost-effective way. And you can throw money at anything, obviously, and fix it, but from a cost-effective standpoint, that's really difficult to overcome. Jeff Davis is over 50 years old. It's at about 70%, and it's actually had a good bit of renovation done to it already, Chad. I know you guys have done a bunch of work. There's still work that's actually going out there, so it's getting quite a bit of attention. It does still need windows and finish updates throughout, but the bones of the building are being addressed. Carver's fairly new. It's in good shape. It's only about 51% capacity. Park Crossing, it's basically brand new, great shape, beautiful school. It's only about 40% capacity. Brubaker, now again, this is, for those of you I don't want you to get freaked out that Brubaker is only at 55% capacity. We're fixing to recommend closing Brubaker down. That's not what we're saying. We understand it's a specialty school. Understand that it is based on if that school was a regular high school, how many students you could fit in that classroom based on that. We understand that it's a specialty program there. It's a very successful program, so understand that. Lamp, that's basically brand new, but it's at 50% capacity. Booker T. Washington, it's under construction now. It'll be at about 60% capacity when it's completed. All right, so some of the, beyond just the physical deficiencies that we've noted, there's some general high school amenity deficiencies that we've noted that many of our other clients and other school systems around generally have that's lacking at Montgomery schools. We know that the model here is to not have competition athletics necessarily at the high school sites. There's pros and cons to that. It's a much more efficient way to do it the way you're doing it now. It may seem great to have a high school stadium on your site to call it your own, but there's a tremendous amount of upkeep, maintenance, and expense associated with that. It's difficult to deal with. So the way you're doing it now probably makes sense for the school system. But what you are lacking are the basic practice type facilities that you really need to be able to compete with other school systems that you're competing with on an athletic basis. So things like field houses, proper practice fields, tracks, all those various things are really lacking at your current high school facilities. Security is a big one at your high school. Besides your new high schools, your older high schools, the security aspects of it are really lacking. That needs to be significantly addressed. There's some pictures when near high school. The roof, it's way past its useful life, lots of leaks. These are some of your windows look like. That's your heating system there. I mean, that's, well, one, it's lasted this long, so it must have been really good when they put it in there. But it's clearly beyond its useful life. I mean, that's a classroom window setup. We've got, safety issues, not just maintenance, but safety issues with some of our electrical system. We've got to address these various things. Restrooms, these right here, they're not even, you can't even install these anymore by code. They're not allowed. This is some pictures of Lee. Again, roof leaks. Even if you fix the roof leak, those sort of conditions are not conducive to learning. You want to be in a bright, clean, safe location, as Mr. Watts pointed out. And we've got to address these issues. So again, the reason we're spending $600,000, $700,000, $800,000 a month on electrical bills is because we've got a bunch of window rattlers in these facilities, which is about the most inefficient air conditioning system you can put in a building. Not only is it inefficient, but it doesn't allow the proper fresh air requirements that we have by code these days to make for a better air quality inside the classrooms. And then the big one really to me is the unsecured points of entry. I mean, anybody can walk off the street and get around any part of that building at any time. Again, inefficient windows, poor lighting. That's their track. Which I think the principal said they still try to use it. So. The middle schools, you've got kind of a hodgepodge. Some are fairly new, some are really bad. Capitol Heights is a lot like Lanier. Really old, really bad shape. Matter of fact, I think, let's see if I can get a picture. Brubaker's in good shape. They've recently gone through some significant renovation. The middle schools, similar. This day and age, the high school's athletics is like college was when I was in college. And the middle school athletics is like high school athletics were. And so we're starting our kids out earlier and earlier with weightlifting and proper programs to get them as competitive as possible. And so we're lacking a lot of those amenities at our current middle schools. And so these middle schools are a lot like little mini high schools these days, offer the similar types of career tech, athletics, fine arts, all these various things in their facilities that we see in the high schools, and we're lacking those amenities in many of our middle schools. Same issue with controlled entry points. We have that issue at elementary schools as well. So we had a lot of these schools built back in the 60s and 70s that got this open concept, pod type concept, access from the classroom out to the outdoors. Never would we design a school like that in this day and age. There's Capitol Heights. Like I said, really similar to Lanier. I think they got a package deal when they bought the Lanier boilers when they put it in Capitol Heights. Baldwin, another, that's kind of a landlocked facility, great school, but in rough shape. Elementary school, we've got some that are fairly new, some that are in rough shape, some that are close to capacity, like Floyd, some that are way below capacity. Benlala, the school down way south is Raymer, Dunbar. Really, I think Dunbar's got like 76 or 8 students. Now, that's challenging in that it's about as the farthest remote part of the county as there is. But that's not an efficient way for them to operate the school. These are most of your really decent shaped schools, but they are severely under capacity. So some of the main deficiencies from an amenity standpoint, practically none of your elementary schools have gymnasiums, which is really, we don't see that very often. We've got to fix that. There's a couple that do have gymnasiums, but they're using them as storage facilities or not for their intended purpose. And so we've got to be able to have a place for kids to have physical education in a controlled environment. And so as we've gone and talked to staff and teachers and various other folks, yes, they do want gymnasium at elementary schools. Some of the schools have, this is one of elementary and middle, obviously, is where you have the most carpooling. And so really critical to make sure that we're separating the car traffic from the bus traffic. We don't want to mix those. We don't want kids walking across drop-off line and not being able to see the buses coming through. And so have an adequate stacking area to get the cars onto the site, off the street, separating the buses from the cars, really critical aspect of what we're looking at from a site standpoint. And then as with all of them, inefficient air conditioning systems, inefficient windows, lack of proper lighting, those various things. Let's view the shots. So again, we wanted to show you a few of these things and give you our initial impressions, but the purpose of the meeting tonight is to not have us feed you information and tell you what we're going to do. The purpose is for us to hear from you. And so we really would like, for those of you who are willing to come up and talk and give us your input tonight, please do so. We've got community input cards. And then the email address I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, mpsk12cip@volcker.com. It is not just a black hole email that nobody looks at. We want you to respond. It will be read, and all this input goes into the overall recommendation process for what amenities go into schools, the type of curriculum that you may want to see to be offered in your various facilities. Curriculum type significantly affects the type of facility and facility amenities that are programmed in that facility. So we need to know, the school system needs to know what you guys want to see as far as what is offered at these various facilities. So if you all could please try to submit your comments by November 12th. We are trying to, the physical condition part, the demographic study, enrollment projections, all that is done. We need your feedback as the critical aspect of finishing up the due diligence side of it, so that we can start the process of putting together programs for facilities, which will determine all the various spaces, the size of facilities, their locations, and then budgets for all these projects based on those programs. I can tell you right now that the recommendations are going to far exceed what the school system has funding to do. So not every single school, I don't think, is going to be able to be addressed. But a whole lot of it, a ton of it will be. And this is a county-wide, system-wide program. The school system is committed to making sure that the quality of the amenities, regardless of where the school is in the county, will be consistent across the board. Consistent. That's one of the reasons why, as Chad mentioned, we're putting together design criteria for all the architects to make sure that the level of fit and finish, what's offered as far as air conditioning systems, classroom sizes, technology, all those things will be consistent regardless of where the facility is going to be. And that's why we're trying to do these concurrently, start these all at the same time. Obviously, some may have some land acquisition, some may have some environmental issues that have to take a little longer to deal with. So construction won't all be finished at the same time or started at the same time, but design will start all at the same time. So with that, I'll shut up and invite anybody that wants to come up. I think, Tania, you're going to MC the comments. Okay, thank you all very much.
Okay, we're going to try and keep our comments to 3 minutes. Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so I went back and did some more research. Just two quick questions.
Yes, ma'am.
How did you collect your data about population decreases in the population concerning Montgomery, Alabama and its students? From where did you get the information, and how did you all derive at the fact that our population would decrease?
So we have a demographer, Dr. Steve Salmon, who did that work on our behalf. I don't know the exact places he went and departments he talked to, but I know he looks at live births. He talks to the planning department. He talks to the permitting offices to determine where new communities are planned for, what permits are out for new construction, all those various things. And I can tell you, we've worked with Dr. Salmon on dozens of different school systems. He's done it without us in dozens of different school systems, and he is the most accurate demographer that we've ever worked with.
And I do respect your opinion on that, but that's a shame way that when people go to court and they choose their psychiatrist to go in the vein with them. And the reason why I'm asking that is because our population increased in Montgomery from the last census, as well as 53% of our population is women. Most of our 34% of our citizens have something above a high school diploma, and there are about those that have the 34%, 89% have higher level degrees. Our birth rate has gone up and our death rate among births has gone down. So my question, the reason why I'm saying all of that is if your person is projecting a decrease, but then you have other entities like our entity, the SHPDA, that has other projections, and because Montgomery has such a high poverty level, and most of our schools that are housed are traditional schools, and because of our Title I data, most of our children in a lot of these schools are eligible for free and reduced lunch, and that goes also with the economic demographics of our city. So my question now, especially when you made your comment about BTW, we know that our magnet schools are going to be taken care of, but the trend across the nation with consolidating schools is that once again they happen in poor neighborhoods or more disenfranchised neighborhoods. So with that being said, how will you all, or when will you all make your consolidation choices? When will the public have access to that information? Is that something that is later down the line? Because as Mr. Watts said, we won't be getting our money, and we know that, and thank you also, Mr. Watts, for your transparency. We won't get that money to 2023, and I like how he explained the bond money because a lot of citizens don't understand that. But when that money comes to flow in, and the reality of it is, if they're going to go with your projections, and most of our schools are under capacity, which a lot of teachers would possibly disagree with that, but I get what you're saying. They're larger in the way they were made, the same way houses are now smaller and older houses that are just more solid tend to be bigger. But not wanting to lose anything in this, especially with facilities for these schools, when will we have that information? Because you did explain last time that once you give your findings, then it's up to the architect. So I'm assuming somewhere in between there, will we get that?
Let me address a couple of things. I don't disagree with the fact that the Montgomery population has increased.
Mm-hmm.
What that represents is student enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
And student enrollment has not increased, it's decreased.
Well, let me address that too, because so many people have gone to Pike Road and to other counties because our educational system has been on the decline, as well as some other things. But as we are moving forward, projections can go positive or negative. And the only reason, let me be real clear why I'm asking about consolidation, because if your numbers don't pan out and you close these schools with these spaces, where them kids gonna go? Because the problem is with charter schools, I'm also looking at the history of those and the data. Charter schools have a 3 to 5 year shelf life. So if 2 of our charter schools shut down and those children have to be reabsorbed into MPS, and our schools are much smaller and consolidated, if you do the history of cities like Chicago, Detroit, St. Louis, and Atlanta, when those charter schools close, it becomes a war zone in some communities. And my daughter goes to a Title I school, and to be honest, the only reason why I'm this vigilant about this, she graduates from middle school, so she will be caught up in this transition, and I have to effectively trace what is going to be optimal for her, because right now she's at Goodwin. So it's very important to me. I'm not disputing your numbers, but I also know that data changes based on trends. And right now, the trend that our country is in, you have a lot of Northerners that are anticipating moving south because of higher rent, living expenses, because I'm not going back to Chicago, because what I make, it's not comparable for me. So what I'm saying is, I get your numbers, but I'm talking about other data and other trends on top of this data. Will you and the school board also take that into consideration, especially when you start, because most of your consolidations, I could be wrong, but they're probably going to start out on the elementary level. Am I right with that? You don't know? Okay.
And so, one, let me just say, the plan is not to consolidate to where we only have 26,000 student seats in the school system. That would be not a wise thing to do. There's going to be plenty of capacity for growth if growth happens, and the consolidations are not going to be anywhere, in my opinion, as extreme as what Mr. Watts had described that was in Birmingham. It can't be. You're right. You're right. And so, right. And so, and when these facilities are constructed, they're not going to be constructed, if their new ones are constructed, down to the exact number of students that are in that. It's going to be, obviously, the prudent thing to do is to have some opportunity for, because the curriculum could change, student-teacher ratios could change. That is the biggest impact to capacity, student-teacher ratio. If you took a kindergarten classroom that should only have 18 students in it, and you turn that into a fifth grade classroom, that classroom can then have 24, 26 students in it.
Yeah.
So those are the things that we've got to take into consideration as part of the overall plan, okay? And so, again, I'm preaching efficiency, obviously, because we want to put the money into teachers, into curriculum, not into air conditioning, empty space, but there's going to be plenty of safety factor, it would be a good term, to make sure that we don't get into a situation where if a bunch of people from Chicago moved to Montgomery that we can't handle.
Well, are you from Montgomery?
I'm not from Montgomery, no.
Can I also, and I'm going to stop, I promise you I'm going to be quiet, I'm not going to say anything else. So, data, because you're a data man, I know you are. I looked at your company, I was very impressed, even though half the stuff I didn't understand. When you have a school system, and Montgomery is not that large, as you stated, we've been at, 38,000?
Well, that's what you have
What we have
space
paid
for.
So that meant at one point, we were at capacity. So when you move the magnet programs out, once again, you're siphoning off almost your top 10 to 20% of a school. Then when you do charter schools, you're siphoning another 20% because of how that enrollment works. So I do understand that the schools may not be at capacity. I think my biggest fear is just to ensure that, because you're saying you brought up consolidation. So my thing is, clearly, there shall be some. But in a system that I think we have 5 major high schools, if you consolidate 2, that could be very dangerous if done incorrectly.
Understood.
For children and community. With elementary schools, you may have more wiggle room because of the developmental age. Middle schools, that is that age when those children turn the corner. And so when you make the statement that some of the means will not be addressed, when the brother spoke Tuesday, see, Capitol Heights needs something right now. Some of the schools need immediate right now, and it's becoming unfair to keep asking our children, and some of y'all may roll your eyes up in your head and get sick of it, but as a 23-year veteran educator, stop asking children for perfection, and you keep giving mediocrity. That's my fight, and it's not with you, it's not even my fight with the board, but we are not in a black and white situation, we in the have and the have-not, even in the black community, and it's irrelevant to some black people what happens in poor communities, but all I talk in are Title I schools. My daughter goes to a Title I school. I think the greatest teachers are at Title I schools, and I think they are always at the back end of the bus when it comes to services and things that are needed. Like you said, you put iPads in buildings where you ain't got no tiles and it's leaking and it's cold. So for those of you who may be on the east side, you may be able to afford to send your children to private school, and you can ignore me
Yes, ma'am. And we appreciate your comments and that. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
I had four children attend Montgomery Public Schools. The schools were well integrated at the time. I spent my life working with the Montgomery County Council PTAs. And the schools were well integrated. They were in much better shape physically than they are now. I remember I've been in the community about 40 years. I moved here from Fairfax County, Virginia. Was extremely involved in the Fairfax County PTA. I remember the battle that went on when there was discussion about consolidation even in Fairfax County. And I remember when Raymer, they tried to close Raymer, the school down in the countryside, and the battle that went on then. I'm just wondering if there was some consideration by the Montgomery Public School Board and its leadership to have a public relations campaign to explain all these issues really, really well to the media and whatever. And also Maxwell Air Force Base was the driving force for getting this approval for this package. And I'm just wondering if your team has gone out knocking on doors in Maxwell. They are the #1 employer in this community. And we need to have Maxwell back in this too, because we do not need to use Maxwell because they're complaining so much about our school system.
I think Ms. Wheel had a meeting with those folks this morning, right? So your point's well taken, ma'am. Thank you.
My name is Jean Charbonneau, and I have been here about 20 years. So we're transplants. We're not originally from Montgomery. And we had 2 children go through Montgomery Public Schools, and we were very, very happy with the quality of education, and we feel like they have been launched successfully on life. And we credit Montgomery Public Schools for that. There are a lot of things that need to be addressed. I appreciate the time and the work personally, and a lot of other people do too, that you have put into both the physical and the demographic assessment. What I would like to know is on the agenda under 4D, you list a 4-year timeline, but did not explain what you expect to have done in that 4 years. Where will we be 4 years from now, particularly considering that we're easily 2 years from seeing any of that ad valorem money? And I was actively involved in the campaign to encourage people to support that, and we had a significant margin of support in our local community. That was not a squeaker election. That was widely supported. So I'm curious to know what your 4-year timeline means to you, and if you can share that with us.
Sure, great question. So it's true that the ad valorem funds don't start flowing for a while, but Mr. Watts, being the financial magician that he is, has figured out a way to do some interim financing to be able to get this program started. And so our intention is, as I mentioned before, to start design on all the projects that the board approves first quarter of 22. And generally, even the largest of high schools don't take longer than about a year to design, which then leaves about 3 years to do construction on all these projects. So depending on the size of the program, if it is generally the size that we think it's going to be, our hope is, ma'am, is unless, you know, our world is in a bit of state of distress with respect to delivery of materials and labor shortages, but our plan at this point is to be complete with all the projects that the board will recommend, hopefully in the next couple months, within that 4-year time frame.
So what I'm hearing you say is you expect to see simultaneous construction at multiple campuses across the entire MPS system.
Absolutely.
And that will be some renovation and some new construction.
And some addition, yes, ma'am.
And some additions. Consolidation is as Mr. Watts pointed out, and you have, reemphasized, consolidation, is a four-letter word. People do not like that word. And so I guess my follow-on question to that is are we going to be able to use some of that funding, and I guess this might have to go to the superintendent and to the school board, will some of that funding be able to be diverted to new buses, more bus routes, because people are concerned about transportation and they don't want their kids to have to be picked up an hour and a half before school starts and make 14 stops before they get to school. That is a real issue, and it's something that consolidation may necessitate longer bus routes. And we're already in a situation where we have some schools starting as early as 7:10 and others starting as late as 8:30, and that's really about having the same bus drivers running multiple routes. So I'm just wondering if when consolidation is considered, because it will have to be at some level before the decision is made, if that will be done, an element of that I would suggest needs to be how we're going to move those kids around so that they're not spending 3 hours a day on a bus.
Absolutely. And, that is a critical aspect of a school zone plan. And, but the fact is we've got some schools that are less than a mile from each other because of the way that the school system was 50, 60 years ago. And so, some of these things just make sense, some don't make sense. And when they don't make sense, the school system's not going to do it. And so the busing, I can't speak to the funding of the new buses and those sort of things. Mr. Watts could speak to that, but absolutely the operation and the efficient operation of those facilities as far as getting kids to them is a critical aspect of the overall plan.
I would just say that as it relates to buses, certainly buses will be considered in this plan because this is a capital plan. Buses are capital equipment, so certainly that could be assumed in this particular plan, along with some other dollars that we receive from the state to purchase bus fleets. So definitely that would be considered. And let me just say also, when we talk about the funding and we need immediate needs, I agree with you. I really do. I think it's an absolute shame that that our schools are in this type of shape, and there was not a push, a real hard, deliberate push for an ad valorem tax increase over the last 5, 10, or 15 years. But Dr. Moore, myself, and the board, we made a decision that if we had to go to the state capitol and yell on the top of our voices that we need adequate funding to address the needs of this school system and of this county, then that's what we were going to do. So I agree with you that there are immediate needs, that things should have never gotten in the shape that they're in now. But thanks to you, and you did an excellent job in help promoting that tax, and thank you very, very much for that, along with so many other people here. So I'm in agreement with you, but that's why we're here now, to try to address these needs as quickly as possible.
I'm also wondering, and the reason I was curious about the 4-year timeline and what that meant was because there was an amendment to the ad valorem bill when it passed, and we had certain state legislators write in a sunset clause. So is that one of the reasons our timeline is a 4-year timeline? And if it is, then I think we need to publicly campaign and make sure our citizens understand that this needs to be done now before we have the potential of going back to 10 mills.
I'll let the board president have
And I can address it partially. The sunset clause is 5 years, and what we're doing now really needs to be done. So I think the 4-year time frame is to get it done regardless of a sunset. And you know what? My feelings are that we're doing everything that the state legislature has asked us to do even now. 6 months after this, 6 months after we got the right to vote, we had to start making reports to them, even though we hadn't had it, it hadn't passed at that time. So we're doing everything we can, and we're doing everything we can at the end of that time that can be eliminated. And that's our goal, is to keep going, get that removed where we don't have to worry about that. It also would not go back to 10 mills. The sunset clause calls for 6 mills, I believe. So it's not as desperate, but so we're hopeful. But the 4-year time frame is just because it needs doing.
I like the urgency.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. The bottom. That's the one bottom.
Yes. Yes, I hate to go back to the consolidation, but my thing is with the consolidation, I don't know how long you've been familiar with Montgomery, but we have instances, for instance, when I went to school, there's 2 high schools, we're less than 5 minutes apart. We're less than 5 minutes apart, and that alone caused incidents to take place. So with the consolidation, would that be a very last resort? Because if we're already declining, I can tell you now that with parents have already gone to Pike Road and Millbrook, if we consolidate too soon, we're going to push more parents out because of the safety concerns that could possibly take place.
Understood. I mean, look, the purpose of this program is to make life better for the students and teachers of Montgomery Public Schools, not to make it worse. And so all those things are going to be taken into consideration, obviously. I'm sorry that the consolidation was brought up so early on in the conversation, but the intention is to improve the facilities, improve the learning environment, and make it easier for the great teachers of Montgomery Public Schools to educate their kids, period. That's the purpose of this program. And so I know the consolidation is a tough conversation. I can tell you one of the very first projects I ever did in this business was Alma Bryant High School down in Mobile. And we consolidated 2 high schools at the time. One school were the farmers, and the other school were the shrimpers. And they hated each other. Okay, they hated each other. And so it was gnashing of teeth and crying and pulling out hair. I mean, it was rough. We consolidated that school into a brand new, beautiful facility. They won the state championship in high school that year, and they loved each other. And so, you know, at the end of the day, it's about the good school, the good environment, and being able to deliver the education in the most efficient, best way possible. That's period. That's what it's all about.
Hello, I spoke at the last meeting. I'm probably going to surprise most of you here in taking a less confrontational tone with the board. My name is Colin Campbell. I'm a parent. I live in Capitol Heights. Let's just have some comments because I thought this was not a question and answer anymore. But members of the board, I ask you to keep this process as transparent as possible. I really appreciate all of this. There are advocates here who want to fight, but we can't fight if we don't know what's going on. We want to fight with you for the students. Parents, the parents that are here, on your comment forms, I would say please ask for transparency in this process. That's the thing that I would ask for. So I want to tell you a story. I hope it's not true, but I think it is. So Volkert entered into a contract with the Mobile County Schools for a capital improvement plan. They provided a site assessment, similar to this one. They provided building designs. They oversaw construction of facilities. And then in 2019, that's 2 years ago, they settled a lawsuit with Mobile County. Now, what was that lawsuit about? Well, they had constructed buildings that had allegedly leaky roofs. You had elementary school students doing water drills. And this is the company that we've contracted with. Now, I respect that. But they fought that school district for 6 years. So why should we trust Volker? But the only way that we can is through transparency. That's the only possible way. We're already in it. We've already signed the contract. Please help us to make this continue as transparent as possible. So I'm reminded of the saying with respect to Volker, there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So, you said you spoke to teachers and faculty at the schools. Did you speak to any at Capitol Heights Middle School? And if you did, who did you speak to? Let us have names. You said that you used industry standards to determine capacity of the school buildings. But did you actually assess the functional space? Did you walk the schools to see which classrooms were actually functional? You said you performed a detailed assessment of Capitol Heights Middle School, that your site assessment is done. But per our last meeting, this is an ongoing condition that is not on your site assessment. This has more water than dry space. And this is an ongoing condition that is causing active damage to a school that is not on the site assessment. So members of the school board, I'm asking you, begging you, help us trust again, help us believe again, and let us fight with you for our kids. So make everything transparent. When are we going to get the detailed site assessment? As we're talking about the different statistical models, the demographics, make everything transparent, please. And thank you so much for letting us be here and holding this and moving the time and allowing so many other parents to get here. Parents, last thing to say again, please ask for transparency. There are advocates here, people here who have kids in these school systems that want to fight. So help us do that. Please help us continue to ask for having meetings like this. That's it. That's it. Thank you.
I'm not going to respond too much to that, but just to clarify an incorrect statement. We addressed the Mobile County thing throughout the entire interview process with us. It was not in 2019, it was in 2003. My daughter, who's a freshman at Auburn now, wasn't even born then. We've done literally, in 2003, we've literally done tens of millions of square feet of buildings for hundreds of thousands of students throughout the Southeast without a single lawsuit. I dare anybody that does what we do to be able to say that. They can't. And so, what I said to the board when I was asked a question by the board, you all are better for that experience that we had because that won't ever happen again, period. And so we take what we do very seriously, and we're very proud of our record. We wouldn't get hired over and over again and do as much of this work as all of our competition combined in the state of Alabama if we did bad work, period. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to get the microphone after my man here talked about his concerns. Those are some real good concerns that he mentioned that he had. I had a chance to read that article about what you're talking about, and to be quite honest, with everyone, I did see some of the things that was mentioned, but also in that article, and I'm just going to say this, just being a neutral party, they talked about some of the issues and some of the things, how they was resolved. And the author of the article also mentioned some of the things that the company, Volker, how they said that they did a pretty good job. And the circumstances and situation of that was very amicable, and it was very fair. And if you don't think that I'm just saying this just to say this to side with Volker, because I'm not siding with anybody, read the article. You can look it up. Look the article up and look at the whole thing. We're talking about in the year is off. 2019 is not the year. That is inaccurate, very inaccurate. So I want to say this, and I think that that I can rightfully say this. I'm a native of New Orleans. I've been here in Alabama since '89. I went to a PWI school. I work over at ASU. I lived on North Pass Road. That was my very first home that I bought. Started a neighborhood watch program when Daisy Fain was very young and her husband was still alive. And so I've worked in the community, so I can stand on that. And anybody who knows about me, I can stand on that and say that. And my question that I want to get the mic is, I've lived on the east side and on the west side and all that type of stuff. My question to you is this. There are services that are being provided in some of the schools, say, for example, like at Wilson Elementary, for special needs kids. I think they have an artistic program. I want to know with the building and the structures and the things that you all are going to be doing here over the span of the 4 years you talked about as the goal, are they going to be adding some facilities and accommodations, say like on the west side and some of the disadvantaged sides of town, and on the, say in the middle, the north side. Is that right? Am I saying that right? The north side? So north side. So north side. So I've heard this sister several times. I've listened to a lot of things, folks in the community. But my question is that, will it be, and my question to the board is, if you have not considered making those type of accommodations for all schools within the area, to please consider that. That's all I ask, is that you please consider that, because there are families that, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, wealthy, poor, middle class, however you want to name it, Republican, Democrat, or Independent, there are kids that have special needs, and those needs need to be addressed. They have to be addressed, and they have to be done equitably. Is that right? Is that the right word? Equitably. So please, I beg of you all to do that and to look at that and make sure that those accommodations are being made, and as well, and try to be as transparent as you can. And I want to say this lastly, and I'm going to say this and I'm going to sit down, because I could get the mic and talk all day. Lastly, one of the things that I have observed since I've been here, since '89, in this great capital city, is we spend a lot of time discussing and talking about problems, but we have no solution. Everybody sit up, they get up, they complain, and and I listen, I say, man, for Jesus Christ, please somebody tell me a solution to the problem. Somebody, put some stuff down and write it down, say, well, this is the problem. We can talk very, very plain and adamantly about the problems that we have and our children have, our teachers have, and we say the financial issues and things of that nature. But I think we need to be more solution conscious when we are up speaking and talking about helping our school system, helping our teachers, helping our parents. We need to be very solution conscious. I mean, I tell my people that I work with all the time, I can have a B session all day. I can have that by myself. I don't need that. I can have it with my children. I don't need that. What I need is some answers and some solutions that's going to help us move forward and be progressive as the great city that we are. So that's my
Great
2 cents.
Great comments, man. Thank you. Appreciate that.
I'll just briefly say, so the date was wrong, but everything else was right. And I guess the point was not the date, it was the lawsuit. It was to beg to keep this process transparent. Because we're in it now. So.
Good evening. So there was a 2006 facility study in MPS, and the amount at that time was $416 million, if I'm not correct, for the things that needed to be done. And surely there were things that were done. You mentioned some of them. It was mentioned, $33 million a year, that this would help a $200 to $300 million bond. Those numbers don't equate. So I just would like to ask, maybe not you, somebody to help manage our expectations. You've shared a lot about all the things that need to be done, And, I think we're all thinking it would be great if it was all fixed. And you said that you admitted that it wouldn't, and that's a fair assessment. So is there anything that can be said right now to sort of draw the line for us, to help us recognize what we can actually expect? And then along with that, in designing, building, renovating all facilities at the same time, can you help me understand the logistics of that with kids in schools? Is there not going to be a problem with that?
Yep, so let me address a couple of the points. I don't know completely what the school's system's debt capacity is. That'll determine how much money they're going to be able to actually borrow. I can tell you that if a study was done 3 or 4 years ago that said that they needed $250 or $300 million worth of work, and if those estimates were right, you could probably double that today based on the cost of construction. So we haven't put a pencil to paper yet to estimate all the recommended work that needs to be done if we did work to every single facility and fixed every single deficiency and built new facilities where they needed to be done, renovations and additions. Honestly, it would far exceed what the school system's ability to lend or to borrow money would be. But the good thing is that you have had quite a few new facilities constructed over the recent history, and the amount of money that I think the school system has got the capacity to borrow is going to be transformational to the school system. It's going to be transformational. And I think the plan is to try to be as transformational as possible to as many facilities, as many communities, and for as many students as possible. That's the best I can give you on that. I don't know, Arthur, maybe you can address the funding side of it. Maybe you don't want to address the funding side of it, I don't know.
I won't get down in the weeds with that. But I will just say that you're absolutely right that the amount of the needs probably will far exceed the amount of monies that would be available. However, we'll have to look at all of the needs, determine what the priorities are, and based on those priorities, of course, those things will go to the board, and the board will make a decision as to what we'll need to do. Now, when we say 200 million, 300 million, 400, I don't know exactly how much it would be yet. The first thing to do is identify the problems, prioritize, and then we make a determination, and then we'll determine what we need to go to the bond market with to determine the amount that we'll be borrowing, and the amount of debt service we'll be paying on an annual basis. So that's how that is done, but we will have to prioritize, because we would not be able to meet $600, $700, $800 million for sure. What are we looking for when we're prioritizing? Well, of course, VOCA would bring a plan to the board. They'll have recommendations for the board. And of course, the board will look at those plans and determine what those priorities are. And I can't, as a finance guy, I can't necessarily tell you what those priorities are, but VOCA will have some recommendations to go to the board.
What I can tell you is that there are some glaring physical issues with some of these facilities. We showed pictures of it. The gentleman there had pictures of Capitol Heights. It absolutely needs attention. And so there's going to be some facilities that clearly have life safety issues, security issues, just basic fitness for an educational facility issue that are going to be prioritized, clearly. There may be some facilities that are in decent shape that may need some minor renovations. The priority obviously will be for the facilities that are in desperate shape. Those are going to be the top priority. That's going to be our priority anyways as we present it to the board. So that's how we're going to itemize those priorities, and then do as many projects as possible, as efficiently as possible. Again, going back to my point about building monuments to architects, we're not going to do that. We're going to try to be as efficient as we can with the money that we have. It's a lot of money, but it's not going to be enough money. So we're going to be as prudent with the expenditure of those funds as we possibly can to be able to touch as many school facilities as we can.
Hey, I am the current president of the County Council of PTAs. We are traditionally known as being casserole patrols and ATMs for school systems, but we're really one of the oldest advocacy groups for families and children in particular in the country. And I actually sit on the National PTA Board for family engagement. We write the rules that Congress generally adopts for family engagement. We are currently in the process of rewriting rules. The last set of rules were adopted under No Child Left Behind. My concerns for our district are, one, making sure that as we remodel schools that there are spaces for parents to be able to gather, because family school partnerships are not only just a pleasant thing to do, but they are part of the Title I responsibilities with schools. Lanier currently is one of the few schools that has a parent space designated, and I think that that is something that would be really important to have at all of our Title I schools. My other question is...
Can I ask, that's for parent meetings? Or is
it's for
is that
them
for
to be able
education purposes?
It's for them to be able to not just do the overall parent meetings, but like they have a food pantry there. Here in Montgomery, only 2 types of organizations are allowed to have offsite food pantries that work with our, I forget what it is, but it's the food kitchen. It's churches and PTAs. So potentially every school could have their own food pantry if the facilities are available and the PTA is operational. And so we get to do a whole lot more for families than what people traditionally think of. So I just wanted to make sure that that's something that everybody is thinking of. I also wanted to echo the thing that the guy said about ADA and things for special needs. That too is not just a nice thing to do. That's part of the law. But really my question was, you brought up that as you're remodeling, you want to make sure that we are innovative, that we're preparing classrooms for this century. Our system is just coming out of state intervention. We've been focused on keeping our accreditation and getting out from under intervention and not as focused, not as able to be focused on innovation. So my question is are we looking at other systems around the country when we're looking for innovation, or are we just taking suggestions from our community? Because I would like to see our students be able to compete with people in other places, not just comparing us to the Tri-County or even the Quad County area.
Sure. I mean, so our basic philosophy on these schools is that the form is going to have to follow the function. And so we're going to take our cues from the curriculum folks, from the administration as to what curriculum they want to teach, and it's our job to deliver facilities that will allow that to happen. And so, again, we haven't had the opportunity yet to start the programming process, which is what defines the spaces and amenities that go in these buildings, but that will very much follow the school system's aspirations. And generally, in our experience, even if they don't necessarily teach something now, they're all very aspirational. And so we want to make sure, if we can afford it, to include those amenities and facilities to be able to achieve those aspirational curriculum goals. Yes, ma'am. Well, if there are no other comments, one, I very much appreciate the participation tonight, much better than the other night. This is what we wanted, and I can assure all of you that it is a very transparent process. These are your facilities. These are not necessarily just the school board's facilities or the teachers' facilities. This is the community's facilities. The community passed this referendum. The community's paying for it. We're going to make the community proud with these buildings. And those are my closing comments.
Thank you, thank you. Good job, everyone. I want to address a couple of things that came up. Number one, about the buses. Most of our buses are less than 5 years old. We have more than enough buses. We have a driver shortage. So that's, part of what's going on right now in the country. Regarding the special facilities, autistic children who are special needs kinds of students, you're not going to find in every school enough of those students to say you're going to have a particular setup. So we do it in clusters, and so we do provide those amenities, and as we work on our buildings, we'll make sure that those facilities are up to speed for those students. Now let me say this in closing. I'm not Volkert, okay? I'm just Ann. But when Ann walked in to Montgomery, Ann could walk around and drive around and look at the buildings in Montgomery and tell you without Volkert that we needed to do something. And so my first question was, how many meals do we have? And the answer was 10. 10. That's the bare minimum. That's what the state says you have to have, or you will lose money. I come from a place where they've had 29, 30 meals for the last 30 or 40 years. So I want you to remember this as we're talking. Even though we're talking about the next 4 years, over time, you will continue to accumulate funds. And then you can get into a cycle of, like what I'm used to, every 5 to 7 years, every school knew that it would be painted on the inside. It's a cycle. Your roof would last so long. Your operations people then could put into their budget, we know that in about 20, 30, 40 years, this roof is going to have to be replaced. And so they could plan for that. In Montgomery, we've not been able to do that. At this point, as we start to accumulate our new money, over time, not 4 years, it's not all going to happen in 4 years, but over time, you will be able to see the facilities in Montgomery taken care of in a much better, more organized way. So don't think about it in terms of it's going to stop in 4 years. It's going to continue beyond the 4 years. But the major push to get us started will be within the next 4 years. And then after that, you'll continue to see great things happening with your buildings. They'll be in good shape. When you drive around town, you won't see some of the stuff that we saw on the screen tonight. That should go away. And we're going to do our best to honor what the community has done in approving that referendum. That is super important. We don't have any dog in the fight except we want to take care of our kids. I've been doing this now for almost 50 years, from the classroom to being a superintendent. And so I can walk into a place or drive down the street and tell you just by looking, this is not good or this is excellent. So we started off with, in Montgomery, this is not good. We're at a place now where we can say we've done something about it, the citizens did something about it, and now we're going to move to the next step. And I think everybody in this room should be proud of yourselves for what you've done, and I think you should be proud of what you're going to see in the next few years to come. So thank you all for coming out tonight. We're not perfect. We don't profess to be, but we're going to listen to you, and we're going to try to do everything we possibly can with the things and the finances that you've entrusted to us. And over time, I think you'll see a difference. So thank you all, and have a great evening. You don't need this. You won't quit it. Oh, there. Where do you go?